right. The last time we were together, we began our study of the medieval church. We talked about the differences in medieval life, and that many times we think of it as the Dark Ages, and in many ways that is, although that's an exaggeration, that is not far from the situation when the civilization in the West declined rapidly with the overthrow of the Roman Empire and the advent of the barbarian tribes. But in many cases, those barbarians who came in converted to Christianity. So the church did its evangelistic work in witnessing to their new leaders. And of course, this also gave an opportunity for the church to fill the void of leadership. And we talked about the Bishop of Rome and how that person rose up to provide the leadership necessary. Leadership not only in meeting the pastoral needs of financial care, but also took leadership in negotiating with some of the invading tribes. We talked about Leo negotiating with Attila the Hun, and Gregory with the Lombards. And we went on to talk about the one great institution of the medieval period is the papacy, the other is monasticism. And although we think of the monastery as a place to close off the monks from the world, many monks actually left the monastery, and because of their disciplined lives, they were able to go into uncharted territories and take the gospel. So we have Patrick going to Ireland. We have Augustine going to Canterbury, England. Columba going from Ireland to Scotland. And then Boniface going from England into Germany. So what we learned is that we have in the West, we have a growing church through the institutions of the papacy, monasticism, and missions. Well, today we're going to look at the Eastern Church in the early centuries, and we're going to find some significant differences in the Eastern Church from the Western Church. But this will be important for us to know as we go forward. What do I mean by the Eastern Church? Well, here's a map that shows the different dioceses of the empire, and this will kind of give you an idea geographically of what's the West and what's the East. In the West, here's Rome and Italy, and over here we have what was then called Gaul. Now it's France, England, Spain, and then North Africa. But the East, the capital of the Eastern Empire is Constantinople. Here are the other two main archdioceses, Antioch and Alexandria. Jerusalem is still an important city, but does not have the importance of the other three. But you can see Egypt, Palestine, what we now call Turkey and Greece, all part of the Eastern Church. As we talk later about the division between the two, we'll talk about the major differences. But of course, in the East, they spoke Greek. In the West, they spoke Latin. They followed different religious practices as well. And so even though it was still one church, one Catholic church with a small c, one universal church, nonetheless, more and more we're going to see divisions that create two churches, the Western Church and the Eastern Church. In the Eastern Church, there is political stability because there still is an emperor in the East. The Eastern Empire survived another 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. Rome fell in what year? What year do we traditionally give to the fall of Rome?
325?
No, 325 was the Council of Nicaea.
433?
433. I think that was perhaps one of the barbaric invasions. But the date that we usually ascribe to the fall of the Western Empire is the year that the German chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, and that's 476. 476 is the important date. Many people consider that to be the transition year between the early period and the medieval period. But the Eastern Empire survived until 1453, when the Muslims finally overran Constantinople. So beyond 476, historians tend to refer to the Eastern Empire as the Byzantine Empire, or they call this the Byzantine period. The reason is that before Constantine established his new capital city as Constantinople, that city was called Byzantium. Byzantium was the Latin name of that city. And so we look at this as the Byzantine Empire. Eastern emperors then exercised authority over the Patriarch of Constantinople. All right, so whereas we don't have a Western emperor to interfere with the Bishop of Rome, the Eastern emperor often interferes with the bishop in Constantinople. We've seen this in the story of John Chrysostom, okay, when Eudoxia, the empress, took offense at John's reforming preaching as he criticized the nobles for their mistreatment of the poor. And so the Eastern emperors continue to exercise authority and interfere with that work. All right. We have already seen through the first four councils, we've seen a number of conflicts, theological conflicts, and especially the conflict, disunity, and rivalry between Alexandria and Antioch. Let me just remind you again that in Alexandria, which is in Egypt, the emphasis was on the divinity of Jesus. In Alexandria, that school of thought tended to say that Jesus had one nature, and that was the divine nature. They admitted that Jesus had both a human and a divine nature, but the human was swallowed up by the divine, like a drop of honey in the ocean. Okay? Alexandria tended toward speculative theology, very much influenced by Greek philosophy. All right, on the other hand, we have Antioch in Syria. Antioch, a long-time church. We read about its establishment in the book of Acts. But Antioch thrived, and the school of thought in Antioch tended to emphasize the humanity of Jesus as opposed to the divinity. And not that either one would deny that Jesus was both human and divine, but it was the way they looked at the relationship of his two natures. And, of course, Nestorius was from Antioch, and Nestorius emphasized Jesus' humanity to the extent that he was accused of teaching two persons, that Jesus was human, and that the Christ was the divine that adopted Jesus' his theology was either incorrect or his language was very inspecific. All right, so we have Nestorianism this, in Antioch that's teaching two persons. We have Monophysitism, which in Alexandria teaching that there's just one nature. But remember at Chalcedon, 451, the Chalcedonian definition said that Jesus is one person with two natures, fully God and fully human. But the Nestorians and the Monophysites continue to disagree with the Chalcedonian definition, and so we have these rival schools of thought in the area. So the Eastern churches were divided in three different ways. At the same time, there were, as we saw, there were 13 different bishoprics in the East, but Constantinople was the first one among equals. It was the leading bishopric. All right. There's politically in the East, there's a threat of invasion from the East by the Persians, and therefore there was a great need for unity in the Eastern Empire. So just like Constantine was concerned about Arianism, the Eastern emperors are concerned about the different religious factions, and so they're desiring to create unity in spite of all the differences. 429, Vandals moved into North Africa, and they brought Arianism into that region. You'll remember that Ulfilas was a Christian missionary, but he was a missionary during the emphasis on Arianism. So he held the Arian theology. So when he evangelized the Vandals and other barbarians, he taught them Arian theology. And so now we have Vandals moving into North Africa, bringing Arianism there for the first time. They remained in power until 533. So we have continued theological diversity. Now then came Justinian. Justinian ruled from 527 to 565. So in the 6th century, we have a strong Eastern emperor. 533, his general Belisarius defeated the Vandals at Carthage, and so he returned Orthodox Christianity to North Africa, uniting the Christians there. His armies invaded Italy, defeated the Ostrogoths, and established a Byzantine presence in Italy, which then became a concern to the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, thinking that now he's got some oversight from the Eastern Emperor. But we have competing Christianities. We have Catholics, we have Arians, we have the Orthodox. And so all of this North African region in particular, because of the vacillations among the different religions, it's going to weaken North Africa. And in the next century, there's going to be a major invading force, the Muslims. And when they come, they're going to find a region that's weakened by theological differences, by political rivalries, and so they're going to find it easy to sweep over into North Africa. Well, in an attempt to unite his empire theologically, Justinian convened the Council of Constantinople II. So this is the second council in Constantinople, and this is in 553. He calls the Second Council of Constantinople. All right, and as a result of this council, the Chalcedonian definition was revised to line up with Cyril's Alexandrian view of the mystical union of the divine and human in the nature of Christ. So what we have at the end of this council is Alexandrian theology, the emphasis on Jesus' one nature, his divine nature. And so in a sense, Alexandrian theology or monophysitism, the idea of one nature, one out. So this is the only council that actually contradicts what is considered orthodox today. All right, so we're going to need another council after this one to bring orthodoxy back into line. But this is Justinian and the Second Council of Constantinople, 553. Yes.
You said that it was Cyril of Alexandria who advocated the one nature. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Make sure that you.
Right. Cyril, we'll recall, was one of the significant players in the Council of Ephesus in 431. He was the major opponent of Nestorius. He represents the Alexandrian view. Then again, Eutychus. We also could have put Eutychus's name here because Eutychus advocated that Alexandrian view that in the conflict that preceded the Council of Chalcedon. So the Alexandrian view is emphasizing the one nature of Christ. Yeah.
And if you could maybe this has to do a lot with my paper that I'm doing, so I wanted to ask you on your opinion on how much do you think Nestorius really was a heretic, or was it really a matter of imprecise language on both Cyril and Nestorius' part?
Okay.
Because I've heard Cyril's view is miaphysitism. It's a little bit different than a monophysicist, whatever that term is.
Monophysitism,
Yes.
miaphysitism.
Yeah.
Well, those are pretty fine distinctions. I'm not going to get into that.
Okay.
But I have always felt that Nestorius' problem was more a problem of poor language than it was of poor theology. I think that Nestorius was not able to communicate what he meant. And again, so, this is going back a little ways to our discussion of the third council, the Council of Ephesus, when Nestorius was the bishop in Constantinople. And remember, his problem was with the term Theotokos, the bearer of God, which was a title of worship given to Mary. And he was concerned that the emphasis was on that when Mary gave birth, she was giving birth to God, and so it was an overemphasis on Jesus' divinity, as if he did not receive any of Mary's human attributes, but instead that Mary was just a conduit of Christ. Okay, and so and also he was worried about elevating Mary to a place of worship. And as it turns out, Nestorius' concerns about Mary were well founded, because as council after council continued to affirm Theotokos as a title for Mary, we see Mary being elevated to that place where she is venerated as co-redeemer, as co-mediator. And so the Catholic Church is simply going to continue to emphasize Mary. Perhaps the emphasis on Mary was a response to their mission work into pagan territories where they were accustomed to having a goddess to worship. And in Christianity, of course, we just have the one true God, and so the Catholics then put forward Mary as someone to worship. But going back to Nestorius, Nestorius was concerned about Apollinarianism. Okay, so Apollinaris before had taught that Jesus had a human form, but had God's logos for his intellect. And so Apollinaris had taught that Jesus was not fully human. The Cappadocians came back to say what Jesus did not assume is not saved. And so again, we have this balance between Jesus being both human and divine. Well, Nestorius was concerned that we were moving back into Apollinarianism, or an overemphasis on Jesus' divinity. So as he's responding against these two issues that he considers to be error, he then allows himself to be pushed back into a corner where what he advocates sounds like Jesus as two persons. And it sounds much like adoptionism when you read what Cyril says about Nestorius. It sounds like adoptionism, where Mary bore Jesus, the human child, and then later Christ, the divine, adopted him. So we have two persons sharing these natures. All right, so that seemed false. Now, the reason that some historians exonerate Nestorius, because later on at the Council of Chalcedon, Bishop Leo of Rome shared his tome at Chalcedon, and at Chalcedon they emphasized that Jesus has two natures, which was a condemnation of Cyril's Alexandrian view. So even though Cyril of Alexandria seemed to win the day at Ephesus, he seems to be condemned at Chalcedon. So Nestorius felt that he was justified. He was vindicated by Chalcedon. And then also Nestorius wrote a later work that we call the Bazaar of Heraclides. And in the Bazaar, Nestorius outlines a much clearer presentation of his theology that clearly teaches one person, two natures. But what is the nature of the Bazaar? We don't know. It could be that Nestorius, chastised by the Council of Ephesus, revised his theology that he presented in the Bazaar. Or it may be that he realized that he had not communicated clearly before, so now he is restating what he believes. So that's kind of a long discourse on the other councils, but I'm not sure what to say about Nestorius, because many scholars have debated Nestorius over the years to say whether or not he himself was a heretic. But I will say that Nestorius, when he was deposed from Constantinople in exile, he went back to Syria, and there a following developed that became the Church of the East. It's what they call themselves. Historians call it the Nestorian Church. But in the 600s, there was a group of Nestorian Christians who followed the Silk Road, the trade routes into China, and they went and gave a witness to the Chinese emperor, and he found it to be an enlightened religion. He didn't convert, but he found it to be an enlightened religion, and he allowed them to build a monastery close by the Taoist temple. And again, that monastery was adjoined by a pagoda. Inside the pagoda there is a fresco of the Nativity. So 100 years after that, a Chinese emperor forbade all foreign religions in China, so he had all the monasteries destroyed. But because this pagoda was an indigenous Chinese building, he let it remain. I've been inside the pagoda and I saw the Nativity there. So the Nestorians did take the gospel to China in the 600s. Okay, where are we? We're to the Council of Constantinople III. The debate there was not so much one nature as where Jesus had one will or whether he had two wills. The Third Council reaffirmed the Chalcedonian definition that Christ has two distinct natures. All right, so at the end of the Third Council of Constantinople, we're back to the Chalcedonian definition and back to orthodoxy. All right, the seventh of the ecumenical councils is the Second Council of Nicaea. And this council was called because of the debate over the use of icons or images in worship. Now, the last time we were together, I brought in, several icons that I've collected through the years through my travels in Greece and Egypt. So I think many of you were here that day to see what those icons look like. But the icons are flat, two-dimensional images, and they were used throughout the churches to adorn the churches, to decorate them, and they were very useful in teaching because most of the people were illiterate. And so these pictures described events that they were hearing about in the teaching and the preaching. But then there was a debate on how they should be used because the worshipers tended to focus their worship not on God or those who were being represented by the images, but they turned their attention to the images themselves. And so there was a debate over how they were used. And so we have two different groups. We have the iconodules. Iconodules, you probably know the word doulos, Greek for servant. So those who served the icons, they taught that the incarnation meant that the divine was joined to the human and should be represented in visual art. But then also there were the iconoclasts. The iconoclasts were the smashers of icons. Some people say we have icon kissers and icon smashers. All right, the iconoclasts disapproved of any visual art depicting Jesus because God said in the book of Exodus, in His laws, that you shall have no graven images. So images are idolatrous. And because now at this point we have Islam growing in the area, and Islam condemned depicting God, and so images impeded the conversion of Muslims, and so there was this debate. Let me read a word from an iconodule. Is John of Damascus, and he wrote a treatise on holy images, and he said, "I honor all matter and venerate it. Was it not the thrice blessed wood of the cross? Was it not matter? Was not the sacred and holy mountain of Calvary matter? What of the life-giving rock, the holy sepulchre, the source of our resurrection? Was it not matter? Is not the most holy book of the Gospels matter? Is not the blessed table matter, which gives us the bread of life? Are not the gold and silver matter, out of which crosses and altar plates and chalices are made? And before all these things, is not the blood and the body of our Lord matter, that is material? Either do away with the veneration of all these things, or submit to the tradition of the church in the veneration of images, honoring God and His friends, following in this the grace of the Holy Spirit." So John of Damascus is saying that God has used the material in bringing about our salvation, the cross, the Holy Sepulchre, even the person of Jesus Christ. And so he's saying that we should allow icons in worship. The Empress Regent was Irene, and she favored icons, so she called the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. And as a result of this council, it was decided that icons are allowed in worship to affirm the incarnation of Christ. Now, here's where the distinctions become pretty fine. People are allowed to bow down before the icons and to kiss the icons, but not to worship the icons. Okay? Now, from our perspective, there's not much difference from bowing down and kissing and worshiping. And so you can understand why there would be the idea, the criticism, that the use of icons was borderline worship of these images, borderline idolatry. But nonetheless, the goal was to use them as teaching tools, to use them as guides to worship, but worshiping of icons was forbidden. Worship was to be bestowed on God alone. Now, both Western and Eastern churches accept the ruling of the Second Council of Nicaea, but there's different interpretations. In the East, only the flat or two-dimensional images were used. All right, here's a classic image of Christ. You can see it's flat. It's really two-dimensional. There's not even any perspective here in this image, but they are beautiful. If you'll recall the ones that I brought the other day, beautiful icons. But in the West, sculpture was allowed. So that, and this is just one more difference between the West and the East, that in the West they allow sculpture, but not in the East. So again, more tension between the East and West. Now, I wanted to show y'all some examples, and again, these are kind of many of these are going to be the originals of the copies that I brought here last time, but this is an icon that is in the Church of the Nativity. When you go to Bethlehem, just before you walk down the steps into the very narrow place where the place of the birth and the manger are, just outside there is this gold and silver Madonna and Child that was given to the Church of the Nativity by the Russian Orthodox Archbishop. And you can see that the Madonna is smiling slightly. This is called the Smiling Madonna. And very few pictures of Mary show her as smiling. This is one of the few. And then see that her hand is positioned like this. This is the style of the Madonna of the Way, and she's pointing to Christ. So this is another design that is popular among pictures of Madonna and Child. All right, here's one, and this is very similar to the one that I brought, and it's interesting to see all the detail that's in this. We have Mary and the Christ child and the nativity cave with the animals. Down here this is Joseph, and who's this figure he's talking to? It's the personification of doubt. In other words, this artist considered that Joseph might have doubted that Jesus is the Holy Child. He might have doubted that he should have married Mary. That's again that we have a different depiction of Joseph in the Scriptures, but maybe he's just kind of reaching back to that past just before the angel came to him to depict Joseph's doubting. This is a very interesting segment of this icon. We have two women who are caring for Jesus, and again, these are not biblical characters, but perhaps they were there. But what this artist is trying to depict is that they're washing Jesus after childbirth. In other words, washing Jesus from the blood that would have covered him during childbirth. What's important about this is that it denies one of the legends that came about Mary's birth. There were those who want to emphasize Mary's perpetual virginity, who say that during the birth process, Jesus wasn't born naturally through the birth canal, because that would have torn the tissue, and she would have lost her virginity through the birth process. Okay? So instead, this legend says that Jesus was just spiritually transported from the womb out into life, like Scotty beamed me out, that sort of thing. But again, this was just kind of an extreme way of trying to preserve the perpetual virginity of Mary, which is not biblical, it is not theological, it is not necessary, but it adds to the legend and the mysticism and the veneration and worship of Mary that's developed through the years. All right, we have the three wise men, we have angels, and I'm not sure what this figure is, but here we have the outpouring of heaven coming down upon Jesus. All right, I say this just to point out all the different kinds of symbols that are included in the icons, and you can see why they were good teaching tools because of all the details. This is a replica of an icon that I bought when I was in Greece. This is can you tell what this is? What's going on in Jesus' life?
Transfiguration.
Mount of Transfiguration, yes. And this blue is a symbol of heaven. So typically, if you see blue, especially in a halo like this, it refers to heaven. And so what we have heaven showing forth in Jesus as he's being transfigured. And of course, we have on different sides we have Moses and Elijah, and here we have Peter, James, and John down below. TJ, you must have a song that relates to this.
Well, no.
Yes. Yes, he does.
Did you want to sing it for us? I'll bring the microphone.
I would love to hear that one. Please,
No.
please do that.
All right.
No.
Okay, the Mount of Transfiguration. All right, here we have the resurrection. And again, we see the blue of heaven. Jesus has defeated death and hell. And he's raising a man and a woman from death. Who are the man and woman?
There. Oh, that makes sense.
Josh? Yeah.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, as representatives of humanity, he's raising them from the dead. And over here we have John the Baptist. We have the kings, David and Solomon. Over here we have the prophets. So Jesus and the resurrection.
Did you mention the two guys on the bottom?
Yes, that's death and hell.
Oh, okay, sorry, I missed
Death and hell are beneath. Yeah. All right. This was interesting. I was. This is on the island of Patmos, and traditionally this is believed to be the cave where John received the vision that he wrote down in the book of Revelation, and it is covered with icons. Here you'll see this little carved out place that has a rug draped over it. It's believed that he stood here and transcribed the vision. I wanted to point this, I meant to mention this earlier. You can see that the walls of the cave are just one icon after another. And I went into a monastery at Meteora, and it wasn't just like there was a frame here and a frame there and a frame over here. but it was that the wall was just covered with one icon after another. And they might be related, but they would not be, they wouldn't necessarily, they were just kind of separate icons telling different but related stories, and they just covered the wall just like this. And then I bought one that is the John's Revelation. We see John here sleeping, and here is the vision. Yes, we have 7 candlesticks here. We have Jesus holding the keys of keys of the kingdom. See, out of his mouth comes a sword. He's got 7 stars in his hand, so he's walking among the 7 candlesticks, holding the 7 stars in his hand. What are the 7 candlesticks? The churches. And then the 7 stars are the angels or the messengers of the churches. So we can always be assured that Jesus is walking among us and he's holding us in his hand. This is an assurance of Jesus' presence with us, even during trials and tribulations, such as the ones facing the 7 churches to whom he was writing. Well, speaking of those 7 churches, you see that he's surrounded by 7 angels holding 7 churches. And so, anyway, just a lot of detail in this icon.
And if I'm saying correctly, under his foot is an image too.
Oh, yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. This again looks like 2 figures. It may be again his foot is on death and hell. I don't know. That's good. So you just look and you just continually see more and more details in these icons. Tina, what?
We were just talking about there's more
Looks like they got them all the way around underneath
all
his feet.
around underneath.
Yeah.
All right. So again, just lots of details here. Any more questions about icons or? Yes.
How would you address this issue in church today? For example, we have an Armenian church, and we're ministering to these guys in the neighborhood, and a black guy said, "Why would I walk in a church with the white Jesus on the wall?" So I addressed this issue to the deacons and said, is this a problem if we would take it down, so we would not be a stumble for people we minister to? And someone said, yes, it would.
It would be a problem?
Yeah. So, I just, I asked him, I told him my personal view, I told him I don't think it's the most biblical thing looking in Exodus 20. And I quoted him the verse, but he still said, the next is going to be the cross, we take it down, So I just left it, I said, okay.
Good. Ben has raised an important question in that our representations of Christ tend to be westernized, anglicized, white representations of Jesus. When, if we look at we recognize that he was Jewish, we would recognize that he would at least be dark complected. So if we simply had no representations of Jesus at all, there would be less stumbling block to those of other races who think of Jesus as a white man's God. Okay? Y'all consider that.
Not even just the fact that he's Jewish, but the area of the world that he's in, that he Jesus lived in, would represent, I guess, a darker skin.
Middle East, certainly. Whereas he's almost always represented in a way that is European or American. So this is a good question, Ben, and it can become a stumbling block. In many cases, it's useful to represent Jesus in many places, many stages of his life, but on the other hand, it can be a stumbling block. So I think you made a good point in a way of applying this question to today. And on the other hand, because it is traditional, there are those in the church who would not want to have that removed. During the Reformation is another time that we see this iconoclasm, because the reformers are going to come in and they're going to want to remove the crucifixes and smash the stained glass windows because they feel like this has become idolatry. So we're going to see this impulse through the centuries. TJ, did you?
Oh, I was gonna ask about, whether or not you felt like the cross has been iconicized. Well, I don't know if that's the right word for it.
Okay. Has the cross been made into an icon? Do you think so?
You could see it either way, really. It's.
That's
I-
how
I-
people
I-
wear all these crosses and stuff.
I know, like, it's in certain areas of community, like, you see people wearing, like, jewelry with just the cross. And you have your rosaries that have the cross at the end. Even my pastor's pulpit has a cross on it. And, I think of back in those days, like when a person was crucified, that was like the worst way to die. And I guess, you could say that because Christ overcame, that way, that it brings the cross to a new light, but still, being crucified wasn't a pretty thing.
No, being crucified was not pretty. And so now we have the cross turned into jewelry and furniture and presented in a way that is not realistic to its origin. All right, but of course, again, you say that it's on the pulpit. Many preachers consider themselves as hiding behind the cross when they present the gospel. And they do want to keep the cross front and center because it is a symbol of Jesus' crucifixion, and the crucifixion is central to the gospel.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, of course, Protestants, when we show the cross, we show the empty cross. Many times we're critical of the Catholics because they show what we call the crucifix. They show Jesus still on the cross. Because whenever they perform the Mass, remember what Gregory said? The Christ is crucified anew. So we have this perpetual sacrifice. So for the Catholics, they keep Jesus' sacrifice on display. Whereas we want to emphasize not only the crucifixion, but because the cross is empty, that shows the resurrection. So the cross is a powerful symbol, and as long as we are not worshiping the cross, I think the cross can be a powerful symbol for our Christian faith. I have not thought about the possibility that the white man's Jesus might be a stumbling block to those of other races coming into our church. And so I think that's a valid point that you made, Ben. I don't know that this is a battle that will be easily won at your church, but it certainly does bring this iconoclastic controversy into the present.
I think they've tried to begin to fix that, presenting a more accurate Jesus. Like, you can't buy children's books with a white Jesus anymore. He's more darker complected. So I think someone's trying to make it better, but I'm sure the picture of the white Jesus is as old as that person who said, I can just picture someone saying that. Like in our church, we have no physical representation of Jesus for that reason.
This is just a kind of an aside, but my wife often opens up our home to the women of the campus to come for the Christmas tour of homes. And a couple of years ago, she wanted to have a little nativity set with a baby Jesus in a basket. And so she went out to look for a baby doll. Well, in our neighborhood, the only baby dolls that she could find represented African American babies. And so she bought one, put it in the basket, set it out on display, saying that you know, typically we would expect a darker complected Jesus anyway. And so she put it out, and then we had I don't know if y'all know Owen and Amanda Neese, but they have recently adopted a child from Ethiopia. And she came in and she just grabbed up the baby. She said, "A black baby Jesus." And so she was pleased that we had represented Christ in that way. All right? Austin, you had a
I think that's a very valid point. At the church I go to, Mosaic, with Pastor Paige Brooks, he beats that drum constantly of like racial diversity in the church. So for us, we do have icons just because it's a very, very, very old Presbyterian church.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not actually of Jesus. They're like the different animals representing like St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke. But the church that he put, the cross that he put up was actually, it's an African, like it's a traditional African like wooden cross hanging from the ceiling. And we're almost split right down the middle between half black and half white. So I think that's a very valid point. Like a lot of people probably, talking to him, he said he did that on purpose, basically, to try to get more racial diversity in the church, and it's worked out so far.
Very good. If y'all have never visited the Mosaic Church on Canal Street, it is diverse, but also it kind of draws on diverse worship styles as well. And they have a beautiful stained glass window in the back. And when I'm there, I just kind of look through and try to figure out what all the symbols mean. But that is a good use of icons and symbols and images. All right, well, thank you for your attention. I meant to get a little further today, but on Thursday you'll have to go quickly through the rise of Islam and medieval politics. So we'll see you on Thursday. And remember, students,